See, this is why I sit and wait a lot.
Why, like,
Hey, is it going
no,
live?
it's
No.
not.
All right, so we'll turn that off. And then we're all set. One on. There you go.
And so we can build into the front of every meeting a minute or two of technology to prepare. But this is great. Thank you for inviting us to participate in this work session. As Council President indicated, this is on the 22-23 annual action plan. Given the timing, Commissioner Miller was unable to attend, so you're stuck with me today. I'm Deputy Commissioner of NBD, Eric Frisch. Hopefully what I lack in institutional knowledge, I'll make up for in charm and wit. Before diving into the presentation, I just want to introduce the interdepartmental team that we've assembled here today to answer any questions that may come up. Anne Silva Tella, our Assistant Commissioner in NBD, Carol Wheeler, our Manager of Housing, Chad Schofield, our Director of Business Development, Johanna Santiago, our Manager of Contract Services. I said interdepartmental because from Recreation and Human Services, Sarah Scott, Director of Recreation and Parks. Stewardship, yes. And Linda Hedden, Carol's right hand, including right now. And of course, Henry Fitz, our Grants Management and Research Coordinator. All right, so very quickly, this is the agenda we're going to go through. It's a high-level review. This is not a lengthy presentation, so don't have to worry about being bogged down with slides. But we're going to walk through some background on HUD funding, and we're going to find some shares. We're going to walk through that background on HUD funding, discuss the current 5-year consolidated plan, review the 2022-23 annual action plan at a high level, look at the HUD funding levels for the coming year, take a bit of a closer look at CDBG eligible activities, and then we will close the presentation with a review of the schedule and next steps. So the city receives an annual direct allocation from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Marcia Fudge was the HUD secretary, for those who aren't aware, so that means that HUD did survive the tenure of Ben Carter. That allocation that we received is over $13 million at the moment. Our use of those funds is sort of governed by the 5-year consolidated plan, as well as the annual action plan. As you're all aware, funds are critical to the work that we do, whether it's economic development, housing, code compliance, parks and recreation, and more.
Just a quick question: how much? 13 million has it been steady there for a long time? Is that a new amount?
It generally holds steady or increases a bit every year. So we have a slide, we have a slide for that to see where it is just in comparison to last year. But of course, it's important that this is one of those reasons why it's important that everybody fills out the census forms, right? Population is very important, right? In terms of how we, there's other factors that go into it. The population, of course, is important. Right. So as was mentioned earlier, the current consolidated plan, the current consolidated plan was adopted in July of 2020. It's a 5-year plan. So my math says that it extends through June of 2025. So the upcoming year, 22-23, will be the third of 5 years under the current adopted consolidated plan. Through the consolidated plan document, we consolidate our planning for the 4 HUD programs: the community development, block grants or CDBG funds, home funds, ESG, and the hot weather housing opportunities with needs.
I'm sorry, could you just go back to that?
So those are the four HUD programs that we detail in the consolidated plan and the annual action plan. So in those intervening years, we produced the annual action plan that details our budget for the year, the activities that those funds will be spent on. The upcoming year's action plan covers July 1, 2022 through June 30th of 2023. The draft was made available for public review and comment on June 13th. The plan documents, again, the budget for the HUD programs, again, how those funds will be spent and what we anticipate the impact of those programs will be. We also, in the annual action plan, document all the input.
Now, where is the public comment posted?
Documents posted to the city webpage, cityrescue.gov/consolidated plan 2020. That's our hub web page for all of our documents related to our 5-year plan.
So on there is previous annual action plans and current.
Yeah, and then it is, it's also, we have a HUD email list that's distributed to, you can sign up for that. And then there's a city release that goes out inviting people to review the plan and submit comments. And we post it at rec centers and libraries and things of that nature.
It's posted there now.
People request it, yeah. Copies are available by request.
Important to note that we had our second public hearing just last night.
And are the dates for those public hearings posted?
Yes.
Last night. And 7 or 8 attendees last night.
So it's yeah. And then there will be one additional public hearing following council. Next one.
There'll be another public hearing coming up, you say?
Right, so we have 3 public hearings for the annual action plan. The second was held last night, and then the third is the public hearing council following the council.
Council.
Following committee. Yeah.
And then, so this is annual, right? That's what you're saying.
Yes.
So could I just offer consideration going forward that host these public meetings, that you would inform council, city council prior to hosting the public meeting, so that we can help to disseminate this information to our networks as well. For these meetings.
City council was included on the email blast. But the public notice went out. And the dates for the public meetings.
So maybe we'll think about how we can draw more attention to that this is the annual action plan.
Yeah, email blast, just like the city.
You get a lot.
Announcements, right? So I would say work with our chief of staff to make sure that this is kind of highlighted. So. It's a priority.
Also important to keep in mind the HUD programs, the 4 that we discussed, what's included in the annual action plan does not include those special programs that came out that were pandemic related, whether it's CARES Act funding, ARPA funding, Hallmark, those dollars not included in the annual.
Which one of these programs include rental assistance? Any of them?
Yes,
CDBG?
yeah, that's in the ESG, right?
Okay, so we're in year 3, and then I think I heard that the rental funds are depleted already.
Oh,
for
are
this
you
year.
thinking of the treasury? Henry, you're talking about the treasury.
Yeah,
Oh,
Okay.
what you called me this morning, just but the U.S. Treasury is it funding from the CARES Act. There was about $38 million that came to the city and the county for emergency rent arrears program that does not come through HUD, comes to the Treasury, which is very confusing. But that funding, the city and the county funded the program, and it's now unfortunately closed now out of funding for grant arrears. That was the primary
can you just go back a couple slides, just to the slide that was, thank you. Thank you.
So these are the aforementioned funding levels for the programs. So you will see in there, some go up, some go down on an annual basis. Overall, generally somewhat steady, and the funding levels are up a bit overall coming year from. Again, these are set by HUD and given to us, and that's the reason we're waiting for these applications.
What's the formula for 209,000 deficit CDBG accrual? Right? So the formula is not just based on calculation.
I know there's a number of factors that go into it.
Poverty rates, not that our poverty rates went down either, but there's a lot.
There's also
It's a formula.
decisions.
Were you surprised to see, were you surprised to see that reduction?
No, because we just say give or take 4% each year. It all depends on the national budget as well and so many other factors.
Right, so even if the formula determines one number, if the funding level and the budget goes up or down, that's going to affect the overall program. But you can see that $13.2 million there at the bottom. That is all of the funding that's available. Documented in the introduction. And since CDBG funding is the largest program with over 60% of the funding, I thought it was important just to quickly go through what are the eligible activities that CDBG can go toward. So you see, as we talked about before, development, we offer loans and grants to city businesses using CDBG funds. We, through our neighborhood service centers, we work with neighborhoods on street days, on business development, things on local level, working with our contract services unit on rehab programs, initiatives with real property. Public services that DRICE provides in terms of recreation activities, elderly programs, parks and recreation equipment. We also work with funding that goes to DES for street work, as well, of course, a number of different programs involving housing. So as was mentioned, we have we're in kind of the middle of the 22-23 annual action plan review. So we had our second public hearing last night, the third public hearing, as was mentioned, July 14th. Then it comes to City Council for approval at the July 19th meeting. And then it's on with the HUD. Of course, the year typically does begin on July 1. Things are retroactive to that July 1 date.
Question about the second public hearing and the first. Did you guys record or capture comments? And what were, is there any overarching or feedback?
Say the general lot related to housing issues, affordable housing issues. Anybody else wanted to comment on what we heard at some of the other hearings?
I think people are generally interested in what are the outcomes from the program. So there were a few questions about how many businesses are you assisting. Right. So coming up in the fall is the report card for the current year. It's called the paper, and that's what we have to do. Send that.
Say that again.
Paper, CAPER.
Okay.
Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report. And
Will you be able to capture those comments and answers and provide those to us prior to the vote or the council meeting? Is that something that we can?
yes, we're required to include them all in the plan. Actually, so you'll see that.
Thank you.
And public has until noon on July 14th to submit final comments on the proposed plan, and those are compiled and sent to City Council prior to your final vote.
Do you know when that would be, like, to be able to review the comments and the,
Send them the following day. After the 14th.
What has been your experience with amendments being made after public comment? Because that's what public comment is for, right? What has been your experience with that historically? Have you ever made any amendments into public comment?
Not in my experience. I don't know about my colleagues.
Has taken place over the years. There have been times when, as a result of the public hearing, the city council, that city council has conferred amongst themselves and decided that it would be their preference to reallocate some of the dollars.
And of course, that public input does then also influence decision making for the future year as well. So we're told to keep it brief as far as presentation. So that is our all of our slides. We did do a presentation for the public hearing this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have copies for everyone of the larger presentation.
A hard copy that you have.
This is just of this.
I just looked through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, it's different.
Yeah, I can do it.
So, questions? Questions? So, just for the broader context, it's a 5-year plan that was voted on and adopted. The 5-year plan, then every year, the next year comes up again for adoption, right? So the idea is that for the most part, what's approved in the initial 5-year plan is roughly the, at least the kind of contours that we follow year to year, some dollars. Do you expect any major changes next year from the previous year? This upcoming year from the previous year?
In funding or?
In terms of how we allocate dollars?
That all really depends on input from the community, the needs in the community, you know, and the dollars that we get for each program, because they're very restrictive on what programs we can also fund from each fund. That's all what the public input process is for.
That's a pretty important distinction, that those pots of money aren't interchangeable. You can't just move.
Oh, yes, absolutely, yeah.
So we can reallocate funds within each of those fund sources, but not amongst the team. Can't take CDBG funds into it.
Could someone explain that? I think that's a really important point, also the caps. I think that is not always clear, and that's super important to how that is used and how it can be allocated to different programs. So
I don't understand. Sorry, what's the question?
I was just asking for clarification, I guess, that would help everyone to better understand the caps that are placed on funding and how to be used within program areas. So you can't move money within some of these programs, but also you can't spend percentages above the caps.
Right. So within some of the programs, we're required to use certain percentages for certain uses. So 15% of CDBG, jumping can only be used, and we can't use more than 15% for public services. And public services are typically your somewhat human service type of, you know, work training programs, things where the outcomes are typically in people count. And so we have to be very careful. We're not spending more than 15% on our youth training programs and workforce development type programs. What other caps do we have?
spending? Like what percentage are we spending here?
We are absolutely at 15%. We have to be very careful, actually, not to go over. Yeah.
There's an admin cap in terms of city staffing.
Staffing and planning. We pay for the planning department. They're funded out of CPG as well. There's another cap in the home part that's for the Community Development Housing Organization, CHODO. We have to give 15% of that to such a community partnership. Anyone else? What are the caps?
Lump and blood.
Go ahead.
For the demolition, which is
20%. So there are lots of regulations that we're trying to make sure we stay within. And
then you also have to spend the money in a timely manner. So we have to do a monthly timeliness test. Make sure that you're spending the money on time. HUD doesn't want you to have the money and not spend it. So you can't have any more than 1.5 times the money that you were allocated at the end of the year. So we have to every month check and make sure that people are spending the money and they're not.
So that means you can't put it in banking correctly.
And
Yes, it's actually entirely on a reimbursement basis.
yes.
Okay.
So just for council members, could we, even if it was just high level as you described it now, get it in a chart, 15% goes to this, 15% goes
Yes.
to that,
We can
just so
provide
we
it.
understand. That'd be helpful.
I think that's really confusing, are the community development funds. Can you like touch on how they interact with the CDBG funds? And how they're determined?
Talking about CDF.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the right acronym, but for CDF. Sorry.
That's okay.
City development funds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are repayments of debt, urban development,
action grant.
action grants.
Right.
Which is many decades ago.
Right.
And those dollars are being repaid to us, so there are less and less of those coming to us on an annual basis. Those dollars have the ability to be less restrictive than any of the federal grant sources that we're talking about. And they are usually allocated amongst the development, larger project development type of use. They're also tied to goals. That's what number of projects or activities we use for. They're sometimes like that special, small additional source of funds to be able to do something that none of the other resources would allow for us to do. That is consistent with the annual action plan and consolidated plan. Provide services.
So there's like a discretion.
It's discretionary in the sense that because it's been paid back from a federal source, that it allows for some flexibility consistent with consolidated.
So that we know that, but it's not a new allocation. It's basically
For instance, we use some of those dollars on a very regular basis in housing to pay for home buyer training for households that are above 8% area median income. The CDF dollars are not tied or required to be provided only to meet assistance at 80% or below. There have been times when we've been able to do some small scale enhancement programs. Years ago, we had a focused investment strategy initiative that we undertook for 8 years or so. That we started almost 8 years ago. And what we were able to do in each of those areas was work with community stakeholders and identify small scale projects that were important to them and work with them to make them happen. So those are the types of things that CDF can help with. They can also help incentivize projects. One thing that's very important from a housing perspective is that is a source of funds that allows us to pay for homebuyer training, which is a very, very important component to the stability and success of our homebuyer programs. We require both pre-purchase and post-purchase training for first-time homebuyers. We provide assistance to folks through the home purchase assistance program below 8% with home dollars, from 80 to 120% through local cash capital dollars. And then for outside those income levels, city development funds are used as a matching grant from our employer assisted housing program so that we can continue to recruit and promote homeownership across a wide range of incomes.
Just two more questions. So on average, can you recall how much is in that discretionary line? And second question, who are the stakeholders that normally we decide how that?
It historically has been an NBD managed resource because the loans that were made were preliminarily first from what is now NBD type of activities. So it goes back through. They're a bit unpredictable because of the different terms of the loans involved that were used. And as repayments happen, they may come in annual amounts that could be small, or they may be full payoff loans that could be rather large. This past year, we had a very large loan payoff to the city, and we had something like $1.8 million, which is incredibly atypical. In years past, we've been fortunate to have $150,000 to $300,000 of CDF dollars. So they're not necessarily always going to be a really, really large amount of money. And we're careful about the type of ways that we can spend them to continue to meet priorities of the city.
Stakeholders that you normally convene to make those decisions?
It's a staff process.
Staff.
But informed by the same annual action plan,
Absolutely.
public process, comments, but yeah.
So a question about ESD dollars. I know we're coming out of a time with the pandemic where we had all this rental assistance and all these different types of programs. Obviously, we won't have that moving forward. So what does ESD actually allow us to cover? What types of efforts or initiatives?
ESG.
ESG,
Yes,
sorry.
I'll look to Mrs. Wheeler. ESG dollars.
Yes, sorry.
Primarily responsible for assisting households and people who are facing homes. There's been operations of home shelters, our staff and support, as well as outreach to folks.
So nothing goes directly to people. It goes to services.
Some are services, but there are some that goes directly to folks who help with rapid housing,
Yes.
and it can also help.
Security deposits, for example.
Rapid housing.
Oh, good.
Any additional questions?
What, does the county follow a similar process? The counties get the same pools of money?
They get all the same pools of money, however, they do not receive contra dollars, however. That's one that they do not receive. However, as far as the ESG dollars, one of the things that we do, city and the county coordinate and actually pool our resources for joint RFP program.
Sorry to get into the weeds here, but one further question on that. So then at what point is, I forget what they call it. I used to be vacation here.
Partners in the homelessness.
Yes, at what point do they factor into the grant
far as the granting process, they have to be heavily involved. Because they are a part of the whole continuum here. And so as we do the administration, with municipalities, city, county, we have to make sure that department, they're involved in our allocation process.
So the idea of a continuum of care, sorry, but the idea of a continuum of care as even like terminology, that's HUD language.
That is her language.
And so every community has to have
Every
a version of that.
A
organization.
version of that if they are receiving these funds.
Got it. And that essentially serves as the like community version of the grant making process. There's the government.
They are responsible, the continuum of care partners in the homelessness are responsible for homeless funding that comes in. They have a say in what is actually being done.
Specifically for dollars related to homelessness.
Exactly.
So most of those dollars are county dollars, not city dollars.
No, we're talking about the whole continuum of care dollars?
Yeah.
No, they're coming from the federal government. Because every year, there are ESG funds, and that's aid allocation. But there are other funds which come into our community, roughly about $13 million a year. And it is that continuum of care partners in homelessness that's responsible for programming those dollars. In addition to that, then there has to be coordination with the continuum of partners in homelessness, or we just our simple ESG dollars is a much smaller pot. As you see, our pot is like $700,000 a year, give or take. The counties is probably about $400,000, give or take. And the continuum of care has to participate. It's a requirement by HUD that continuum of care participates in the allocation of those. So they sit on our review process to help determine how those funds actually spent, so that there is more coordination within the community towards how the homeless dollars are being spent.
Okay. Last question, it's probably not something we answer today, but I think Mary had sent around, I'm sure a lot of people saw the article about all the work Houston has done related to housing. Did folks from the administration get a chance to see that? So we'll share it around. But there's a really big, it was New York Times 2 weeks ago, about just the impact that the city of Houston has made in reducing homelessness by a really significant margin in a very short period of time. And it seemed like a lot of it was due to the collaboration between different levels of government, the nonprofit sector, et cetera. And I just wonder if there's some lessons to be learned there. I'm not saying there's not coordination currently, but certainly I think we can all acknowledge there's probably more to be done. So it would seem like when we get HUD dollars and we have a chance to go through this process, that's probably the best chance to do some of that work. So maybe we can follow up, James, if you wouldn't mind just sharing an article with the team here, and maybe this follow-up conversation we'll have.
Always love to have good.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. Carol, quick question for you. We can get mental act dollars roll through continuum of care also?
Yeah.
Are all of these dollars represented in the budget? Will we get these dollars that are included in the budget? Or not?
This is a specific separate. Yeah.
It's apart from our,
Apart.
the city budget.
The city budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are these dollars reflected in that? Or is that-
This is it.
The only piece that is some of the city staffing costs would be shown as anticipated revenue to support some of our staff.
And that's just because we can't count on it every year.
No, that's just the terminology for the budget. It's anticipated grant
Oh,
revenue.
I just mean like in general, like, we don't.
If the light is ready,
He's still for too
You
long.
still have a chair.
I think it's HIV.
Chair, some of it, sometimes the chairs.
I think the chair was restricted, but I don't know. So it should be a push to go to the state.
So, obviously, folks can continue the conversation, but it seems like most of the questions that have been put out have been answered. We will follow up with additional questions before the council meeting, but if there's any additional materials that the council should have, please send them our way. If there's any video recordings or anything from the public meetings, anything like that, we'd be happy to review those as well.
The record time for work sessions.
It might be. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Guys, you guys